Hey guys, welcome back to the archives. Today we're in Benton, Illinois, and we're at the Ford Garage Museum of 1910. Today we're going to get a tour with Bob Ray. He's going to show us all about this museum, all about the cars. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Let me know which car's your favorite in the end, and let's get a tour.
So I'm Bob Ray, and I'm the president of the Franklin County Historic Preservation Society. And this is one of our two museums. Of course, we have the 1905 Historic Jail Museum, which you have covered. And our second project, again in 1999, it was this 1910s Garage Museum. So what is important about this museum is that it is the first Ford franchise in Franklin County, and it was built specifically as a Ford franchise in 1910. And this coincided with the discovery of the deep coal reserves, ability to discover coal, in our case, at 700 feet. Franklin County was the largest, fastest growing area east of the Mississippi River for a 10-year period. The town of Benton here was around 3,000. It grew to 10,000 overnight. Towns like West Frankfort did not exist. They had a Frankfort Heights, but it grew to 20,000. So our population consisted mostly of Eastern European immigrants and who came here for the job opportunities, and that coincided with Henry Ford's ability to, with the assembly line and manufacture an affordable automobile. But the building, while it only holds 7 or 8 cars, is unique in that it's a barrel top building. And it was the central quarters for a satellite operation in which there were 4 or 5 dealerships. I know there was one in Thompsonville, one in West Frankfort, I believe one in Aiken. And the owner of this, at the time, the Historic Preservation Society took it over. It had been vacant for 10 years, and there was a Mr. Anton Thoman who came here when he was a young man with his father from St. Louis, who was a chief mechanic. And he was the chief mechanic for the Dimond brothers. Dimond is D-I-M-O-N-D. And they were land developers. They developed some coal properties, but they built this building in 1910. So Anton was still alive at the time, and he shared stories that were passed down to him. So the other unique thing is that 90% of what you see here on the walls, the different automobile signs and different automobile parts, had never left the building. They were stored in a loft area. So the Model Ts would come in in crates in the Illinois Central Railroad, and he said that all hands would go down, open the crates, and then get them running, bring them back, and there was a 10-acre field, and the cars were assembled and then taken to the various dealerships. So we have, I'll expand later, but the Ford franchise was sold in 1916, and they took on Chevrolet. 3 brands they had in giving up the Ford franchise were Chevrolet, and then Oakland, which is a forerunner to Pontiac, and then in the corner we have a car called a J. Dallas Dort, and it's a 1916, and it was a very popular model in Canada. It had a Lycoming motor, and the founder was William Durant, the founder of Buick, which later became a part of General Motors. But what I'd like to do at this time is explain the Model Ts that we have on display here. We have a 1914. It's up in the corner over here, this black one. And it's up on the red stand that is on is actually a brake calibrating machine. So before the advent of hydraulic brakes, each wheel had to be adjusted to the same tension as close as possible to keep the car from, to make the car stop properly. So this 1914, by the way, we have a postcard of this garage that has a 1914 in the front of it, but it's from the brass era. This car is a 1912 Huckster, and it's actually owned by the Hux Corporation, and it's of the brass era, obviously. And I will say as a side note, the uniqueness of this car is the fact that the chassis was once owned by Charlie Berger when he lived in Ledford, before the Volstead Act, before Prohibition. He had a Model T truck, and that, while the Model T body is gone, the owner of a Ford dealership in Carmi had kept that, and Mr. Bailey was able to get his hands on it and put a different body on it. So this is of the brass era. And the third Model T we have here is a 1926. And they started making the Model T in 1908, and then in 1927 they switched over to the more modern Model A. So this is a more most as modern of a Model T as you can get. In fact, in June of that year, they switched from the wire spoke wheels from the wood, which this one has, to the wire spoke wheels. So just for a portion of a year, actually for a year and almost a year, they made the wire wheels, but it was phased out. So the three differences between the brass era and this more modern era would be, first of all, in these two, the 1914 and the 1912, the gas tank was underneath the passenger seat. And that might be a bit dangerous, but the downside of it was, if you were going up a hill, since the engine was fed by gravity, did not have a pump, you would have to go, if you were in a place like Johnson County that had hills, a steep hill, you would have to go up in reverse, so the motor wouldn't be starved for fuel. Second difference would be, it had carbide lights, non-electric lights. And thirdly, it only had a crank start. And then by 1926, in this model, you can see it has the electric headlights, and it has a crank on the front, but that is a backup to the electric start. Okay, then the other big difference is the gas tank on this car is up on the cowl, so you could actually go up a hill or down a hill and not be starved for fuel. So we're talking in 1916, the DeMond brothers relinquished the Ford franchise. People were tired of having, now that 26 was a green, and they made an exception in 26. They were competing with Chevrolet, and people wanted more colorful cars, faster cars, and so the DeMond brothers took on mainly the Chevrolet franchise, but also the J. Dallas Dort. We picked up this 1916 J. Dallas Dort, and to give you an idea of how much more modern it is, the Model Ts, instead of having a geared transmission, they have a series of canvas bands under the floorboard, which you would have to adjust and work on, that were a problem. This had what's called a Lycoming, kind of a same style as an aircraft motor, and it had Westinghouse electronics. So it was a modern car for the day, and of course you had a range of color choices. Now the Chevrolet, we have a 1928. Chevrolet that was donated to us. It's an interesting story, but we had a gentleman from McLeansboro who visited, had several cars, and when he died, he left this one to us in his estate. But the DeMond brothers, you can imagine here we had thousands of coal miners. This was a booming area. And for 3 years running, and this was just the headquarters for a satellite operation. This was they had the leading sales during the late teens for Chevrolet in the state of Illinois. The #1 dealership for 3 years was right here. And so we're proud to have the Chevrolet as an example. And the other was the Oakland, which is now people would know as Pontiac. Of course, a lot of young people are forgetting even what a Pontiac is. So we had one of the members of the Historical Society back in the 50s. He was working in the north, and he paid something like $100 for this car, and it's a Hutmobile 1926H. So this is all the room we have for these automobiles. And while a lot of museums have hundreds of automobiles, I like to think that our advantage is the fact that we are housed within the original building, and these signs that you see on the walls all came from the attic, as well as this had petitions in it for sales, but they also did motor milling and working and assembly at this location. It doubled as a repair shop, so it had this belt-driven equipment. We had 2 sets of belts. This one was still intact when we got the building. And it had 3-phase power. It was just really ahead of its time to have that equipment. But that is the same equipment that has always been on that wall since 1910. And then we have a storage attic area up here. And, well, for instance, on the wall, this is a multiple battery charger. The thing that looks like an accordion under the fender, that's something you bolt on a running board to keep your luggage. This Ford sign up here, we were... in 1999, we were restoring one Saturday, and a man came here and told us that his father worked for Anton Thoman, and he had a Studebaker garage, and he just went to general repairs. Mm-hmm. And this worker had put in a coal stove in his house and was afraid that the wall would burn. So Anton went up in the attic and got that piece of metal and said, well, why don't you take this home and put it on the wall? Huh. So they took it off the wall. It has wallpaper on the back, but the other side says Ford, and they said, would you like to have this back? So this was the original Ford sign that came from this building. It was in Christopher, attached to a wall for I don't know how many decades, and then it made it to its way back. So we're proud that everything we have here is 80-90% of it's associated with the garage. I said earlier, this was the second project of the Franklin County Historic Preservation Society, and the first project was the jail in 1993. And by 1999, by the time we took on this project, we made the city of Benton a partner in the building. We were able to obtain a tourism attraction grant, and then we were out and raised matching funds for the balance, and then donated our labor for a 1.5-year period, almost every Saturday, historic preservation. But what's good about this building is the fact that it is the office for the Benton Chamber of Commerce, which gives it a purpose, a place to meet. And then when visitors come here on chamber business, or if a person comes in, the doors are open and they can pick up information about Wren Lake, the region, and about our community. So it's a win-win to have a city office housed within a museum. So it was April 1st of 2000, we opened the museum. Well, then all the grade school classes started coming in, and I would explain all the automobiles, and somehow they didn't find that as interesting as Charlie Berger's hanging. So I was struggling for something to talk about, and I had some time. So when we were cleaning out the attic, we had this bottle of battery acid, and these mice, like 110 years ago, crawled into this jar and died.
Oh
so
my gosh.
I had this group of grade school kids. I knew I had their attention when I talked about the petrified mice, and they all came up and looked at it. So for a decade, every time I had a grade school class, they'd come in the door and say, we want to see the petrified mice. So I thought I would show you the petrified mice of the Franklin County Garage Museum.
That's interesting.
They entered, but they never came out.
Well, all right, guys, that ends it for this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Bob is awesome over here with all the museum stuff that he does. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Let me know your favorite car in the comment. Also, make sure that you get over here and check it out in person, because it's a lot cooler to see it in person. And they are always adding and always welcoming, so make sure to do that if you get a free weekend. And we'll see you on the next episode.